Hello, all. Most of you know that Christopher Lee played Dracula in 7 horror movies. Those movies being sequentially the Horror of Dracula, which in the U.S. was just known as, or in the U.K. was just known as Dracula. The second is Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Then Dracula Has Risen from His Grave, which is one of my favorites. Is also one of the goriest, but it's really quite good. Taste the Blood of Dracula, Scars of Dracula, um, uh, Dracula AD 1972, and the last one was Satanic Brides of Dracula, Satanic Rites of Dracula. I'm sorry, also known as Dracula and His Vampire Bride in the U.S. But he also played Dracula in another movie, which you may not know because it's not quite as well known. It was made in 1970 by the great Jesus Franco, who went by the name Jess Franco. Also directed such movies as Vampiros Lesbos and The National Mummy. And he was really quite a good Spanish director. It starred Christopher Lee again as Dracula. Interestingly, Herbert Lom as Dr. von Helsing. Klaus Kinski as Renfield, although his role is mostly silent, which I thought was interesting. It stars the very beautiful Soledad Miranda as Lucy, and Maria Rohm, a beautiful Austrian blonde, as Mina Harker, and Paul Muller as Dr. Seward, and Fred Williams as Jonathan Harker, Jack Taylor as Quincey Morris, and two women who played Dracula's bride. There are three, and I don't know why one of them is not credited, but two of them were Emma Cohen and Janine Maestra. And this is a very strange movie in that it's an international co-production. It was produced in West Germany, Spain, Italy, and the United Kingdom. And it was produced by Harry Alan Towers, and that name was significant. Harry Alan Towers, A, married Maria Rohm, and B, he directed the Fu Manchu series of films, which also starred Christopher Lee, but also produced several of the Sumeru films. Sumeru was another character created by Sax Rohmer, who created Fu Manchu, when it was mentioned to him that Fu Manchu was kind of an Asian stereotype, and that a negative Asian stereotype of the criminal mastermind. And so they said, can't you just create someone else? He created the character of Sumeru, who was a sort of a proto-feminist. She was a woman who wanted to take over the world, wanted women to take over the world, but by murder, which was interesting. There were two films that were produced by Harry Alan Towers. Those were The Million Eyes of Sumeru and The Girl from Rio. And there's a more modern one that I like that I've also already done a review of that, so I'm not going to discuss it. With the very beautiful Alexandra Camp. But in this movie, it's considered at the time, and again, remember this was made in 1970, the most accurate version, the one that reflected the Bram Stoker's novel the best. And that is in fact true. Some of those instances are, Dracula starts out, he's an old man, and as he drinks blood, as he uses his vampiric powers, he starts becoming younger and younger throughout the movie. Like the Hammer Dracula movies, he does have the red, bloody, eye contact lenses, and he looks very, horrific and menacing. There are some things that didn't work very well. Bats flying outside the window are obviously like plastic or rubber bats. I guess you couldn't get real bats back then. Film them anyway, get them to cooperate. Probably still couldn't do that today. But the movie starts out the same way as the Universal Dracula and the Hammer Dracula. Jonathan Harker, a lawyer, travels to Transylvania to meet with Count Dracula. He is told by superstitious local villagers that he shouldn't go there, that it's St. George's Night. And I found out that's actually real St. George's Night. It's the night of April 23rd is viewed as a night when, kind of like Halloween, when the spiritual realm and our realm are close together, and allegedly evil things can happen on St. George's Night. They tell him not to go. He does anyway, because that's what he's been hired to do. He's picked up by Dracula's, rather silent, sinister coachman and taken up to the Borgo Pass, which that's real. That is in Transylvania. And meets with Count Dracula. Again, Dracula doesn't eat or drink anything, so they've already eaten. And I've prepared a room for him. He tells him that he's found the property that he's been looking for in London, and he gives him the deed and the mortgage, and says, you can move in right away. And he says, why don't you, you must be tired from your travels, why don't you stay here, for tonight? And he says, I've arranged a room for you. He says, well, okay, you're all right, I am rather tired. He goes into the room and he starts having some kind of strange hallucination. One, he notices that Dracula's locked him in, and he can't get out of the room. And he seems to have disappeared, he can't find him. Then the other is that he falls asleep, but he has a very strange dream in which these three very seductive women are trying to have their way with him, and he's resisting, and I don't know why, but it turns out that they're vampires, and they show their fangs, and they're going to attack him. And then Dracula comes in and says, "No, stay away! That man is mine." And he chases them off. And he gives them a young baby to feed on instead. And you had seen a previous scene of a woman knocking on the castle door saying, "I want my baby back. Where's my baby?" That woman was played by Teresa Gimpera. Teresa Gimpera was also in another excellent vampire movie called Young Hannah, Queen of the Vampires, in which she plays a vampire, and that is a really excellent movie that I highly recommend. But in this one, she was just called the Crying Mother. Also, Jess Franco himself had a cameo role as Von Helsing's servant, and he's only in, I believe, one scene. But Jonathan Harker wakes up, and he assumes that this was just a bad dream, until he notices he's got 2 puncture marks on his neck, and now he starts to become panicked. He crawls out of his window, this is in the book too, to another room, and inside the other room, all he sees are 3 empty coffins, and there's a fourth one, and that is Dracula's coffin. And he pushes the lid open, and he sees Dracula in it, and there's blood dripping down his mouth, and he's got fangs, and he freaks out. He jumps out the window and into the river below, and that's the last he remembers. He wakes up, and he's in Dr. Seward's clinic in Budapest, in London rather. They said that they found him in Budapest floating in a river, and he couldn't remember anything. He tells them the story about Count Dracula, but of course nobody believes him until Von Helsing examines the bite marks on his neck. Von Helsing is a student of the supernatural, and he works at Dr. Seward's clinic, and he tells him, maybe, Dr. Seward, maybe there's something in this story after all. There's also another apparently insane resident called Renfield, and Renfield is played in this movie by Klaus Kinski, and he's just mad. He does things like he saves up flies in a little box and eats them, but he won't eat any of the food that's offered to him. He throws it on the wall and smears it, and he's kept in a wall with rubber rooms, and most of the time he's kept in a straitjacket. Whenever Dracula is nearby, he becomes very excited and agitated and starts screaming for no apparent reason. But they told him the story of Renfield, that he was traveling with his daughter near the Borgo Pass, and his daughter just suddenly started to become sick. And each day she became weaker and weaker until one day she died, and Renfield noticed that she had 2 puncture marks in her neck, and he lost his mind. And that's not exactly what happens in the book, but it makes references to the book. Of course, in the book, the first person who visits Dracula is Renfield. He's the lawyer who sets up Dracula with the home, and is victimized by Dracula and basically becomes his servant. But that doesn't happen in this movie. But Harker is now visited by his fiancée, who is Mina Harker, who is played by the lovely Austrian actress Maria Rohm, very beautiful blonde, and her friend Lucy, who is played by Soledad Miranda, a very beautiful brunette, who I think Franco had a bit of a crush on, despite the fact that she was married. In fact, I think there were some indications that he had planned to ask her to get a divorce. Unfortunately, she was killed in a road accident in Lisbon in the same year, in 1970, after making this movie. And they start comforting, Jonathan, saying, "Oh, he's not," telling Dr. Seward and Dr. Van Helsing he's not insane, and he would never make up a story like this. He's a lawyer and he's a very sober person, and this is not like him at all. And they start trying to kind of nurture him back to health, but they don't realize that Dracula has followed him back to London and is living in an abandoned abbey, desanctified abbey, close to the Dr. Seward's clinic. And Lucy and Mina arrange to stay at the clinic, and one night, all of a sudden, Lucy hears Dracula calling her name, Lucy, Lucy. She sees a bat outside her window, and just walks out of the clinic into the woods and goes to meet Dracula, who is, drinking her blood now. And as he does this, he starts to get younger. His face becomes younger each time he does this. Mina has watched her do this and reports to Dr. Van Helsing, who says he thinks he knows what's going on, and he thinks that this is a case of vampirism. And Dr. Seward says, "Oh, come on, you don't really believe in that stuff. It's all superstition." He says, "No, it's not all superstition. Part of it's based on fact, and I think these creatures really exist. That Count Dracula is one of them." And they go about trying to track him down. Finally, Lucy dies. He's drained too much of her, but she now becomes a vampire, and she's stalking, after her funeral, she stalks a young girl in the graveyard and drains her blood. And that's from the book too. And so finally Van Helsing and Quincey Morris, this other character who works at the clinic, and Dr. Seward trace Lucy's grave, and they find her, and they drive a stake through her heart and decapitate her. And they also find some other vampires, and they destroy them, but Dracula's missing. Dracula has arranged to be taken back to Transylvania with some Romani gypsies, and they are sailors, and they take him back to, in his coffin, back to Transylvania, but he's been traced by Jonathan Harker and Dr. Van Helsing and Quincey Morris, rather, and they capture him during the daylight, and they burn his coffin. Because it's daylight, he can't escape, and he's destroyed. I think, again, that's close to what happens in the book. There's something with the train that I don't remember. I haven't read the book in quite a number of years, though I do have a copy of it on my Amazon Kindle, and I'm going to reread it again soon, just to remind myself of how it differed. I know a lot of it is quote-unquote epistolary, meaning it's done as a series of letters from various characters to other various characters, which was fairly common for the time that it was written. I believe 1876. And certain parts of it are still based on a stage play rather than the novel. There was a famous stage play, and that's not unusual in that Bram Stoker was a stage manager and was very familiar with the theater and managed to get a play of it produced very early on. And a lot of including the Todd Browning version of Dracula is based on that stage play, as is the Hammer version, the horror of Dracula. But this, I think, is a very unique version. It's very weird, moody, atmospheric. Dracula doesn't say a whole lot in the movie, which is different than a lot of other movies. But he comes across as very creepy and menacing, and I really quite highly recommend this and all of the movies of Jess Franco that you can find.